Michael Kitces.
Greetings, Carl. How are you?
Things are really, really good. Yeah, spring is
Spring,
always good.
spring season's well underway. It's probably gonna be close to summer by the time this comes out. It's, I guess, early spring for you, late spring for us in May here. We record
Yeah,
these a little ways in advance, so we'll probably be well into summer season by the time everyone hears this.
which is a great time for this episode because I have a question for you.
Oh,
Um,
okay. You have a
I've been having,
summer-related question, or you have a spring?
yeah, I mean, just like a new beginnings, like open mind, like
Okay, so spring question. Spring question.
exactly a spring question.
Okay.
Um, and it's basically I just maybe I could take a few minutes and walk you through an experience I've been having, and it's been
Okay.
going on for a couple of years. I'm just sort of getting my head around it, and I want to see what you make of it. So, would it be okay? Let me just kind of take you through the exercise.
Okay. There's an
Okay, and
exercise. Okay.
yeah, and we're gonna try for everybody who's listening to this. We're gonna try to use a little technology here. I'm actually gonna share my screen and draw. I've done lots of this.
Right.
We used to do with NPR. We used to do uh, art on the radio. So I'd have to, with Tess Viglin, I'd have to describe the drawing. So I'll describe it, but know that if you want the added multimedia experience, you can go watch this on YouTube. So
I was going to say, I mean, we actually video broadcast this as well. I think right now we're something like 80% listeners and 20% viewers. So more people hear us through Apple Podcasts and the like
sure,
than YouTube. But I guess fair point. Like you can watch along because Kitces and Carl is also on YouTube.
perfect. So, but we love our listeners, so we'll describe it for them. So
Okay.
imagine I'm in a room, and I've done this in groups. I've been doing this for probably 3 or 4 years, and I've done it as
Right.
groups as large as 1,200 and as small as one. So imagine we're in a room, there's big screens or there's a whiteboard up, and here's the setup. And in a minute, I'm going to actually share my screen and put a whiteboard up. But if you're in a place where you can do this, I actually want you to take out a piece of paper. And this is not just you, Michael, like everybody listening, like take out a piece of paper. If you're listening to this while riding your bike or driving or whatever, just we'll make a mental note here.
Mental
I'm
note.
going to draw something on the screen in a minute. And I want you just to pay attention to the first thought you have. So you're going to pay attention to two things. Number one, the first thought you have. And the second is the first associated feeling. Like what's the feeling? So the first thought and the first
First,
feeling is what you're going to do.
first thought, first feeling.
Yeah. And if we were in a room together, I'd actually have you, if it was a small group, and again, I've done this with huge groups. I'd have you write it down on a piece of paper without your name, and then I'd have you hand those in if we were in a group of maybe 100 or less. And we
Okay.
would we would use these as the discussion that would follow, which is sometimes gone as long as 90 minutes, where I've literally not done anything else for the presentation but work through things on these pieces of paper. So so make a note. So here we go. So I'm gonna hit share now, and we're gonna, for those of you watching, just this is a little clumsy because we want to get the iPad up on the screen. So
So I
we'll
guess for
share.
anybody who hasn't yet, like if you haven't hit pause to get your piece of paper to write something down, this is also your moment to hit pause uh,
Exactly.
and pull it up. Okay, so
Yeah.
for
Okay,
the
so
listeners, there's now a screen share of a blank white page.
yeah, so imagine if we were together, this would just be a blank
Okay.
whiteboard, a blank screen, whatever it is. 1,200 people, it was two giant screens.
Yep.
And now you're just paying attention. I know this is a long setup. This is about how long I even take when I do it in real life. So you're paying attention. First thought, first feeling. Okay, here we go. We'll even do this in Kitsis Blue just for fun.
I appreciate that.
So for listeners, I just drew a dollar symbol on the screen in blue. It's just a dollar symbol. And interestingly, there's some debate over whether a dollar symbol has two lines or one line through it. I've always
Right.
drawn it with two, but a lot of people say it's just one.
I've only ever learned it as two.
It's fascinating. I spent a bunch of time trying to understand the origins of that problem. But
So it's
so
like so they just right flows through on the S with the vertical line or two vertical lines.
literally a US dollar symbol.
Okay.
First thought, first feeling. Okay, so let's assume that you have that. Let me give you some examples. This is actually a real life example of about, I think it was 18 to 20 people. And afterwards, I took them all and I put them in two lists. So I'm going to now show those lists on the screen. I'll read some of them out when I'll read some of them out for the listeners. So if I go to the next screen,
Okay.
so here's some of the words. The first thought or word that came into mind: freedom, opportunity, opportunity twice, freedom to choose. This is literally of the 20 people that were there. This is the spreadsheet they gave me. Bank accounts, inadequate. I mean, the
Oh,
first thought, inadequate. Now, here's what's interesting. I'm going to match these up actually. I'm going to tell you the first thought and the first feeling for
okay.
each for a couple of people. Like, so the first one on the list, the first thought they had was freedom. The first feeling they had was peace of mind. If we go
Okay.
down to that one, I'm super interested. This first thought was inadequate, and the first feeling was desperate. And then I did actually pick this one out to talk that one. I talked to that person. I asked them, would it be okay if we had, I didn't have their names. So I just said, hey, whoever wrote this, would you be comfortable talking? And they raised their hand. And then this other one I want to pick out is down near the right in the middle. And we could just read through all these like security, cha-ching, success, worried. But this one right in the middle was yes, like with like five A's. Yes, I guess. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. And three exclamation marks. And then their first feeling was love. And I flipped through these cards that they handed in. I saw this one. I was like, whoa, who was this? Would you be willing to talk about it? And she raised her hand and we can get into what we talked about. But that one around um inadequate and desperate, and this yes and love, two fascinating things to me. But look down like money, optimism, uh, spelled incorrectly, money, greed, money, I like it,
Security, stress.
security, stress, cha-ching, excited,
Even there's,
worried,
well, there's two different cha-chings. There's a cha-ching desire and there's a cha-ching excited and worried.
fast. So here's the deal, Michael. This is what I wanted to talk to you about. I've been doing this for 2 or 3 years now. At this point, definitely over 100 reps on it. This and in some cases, I like I said, there was a group recently in Florida with 800 people. I spent my full 60 minutes just with this. I actually did, I had a whole presentation, but I just threw it away because I was like, and I found somebody in the audience, 800 people there. I found somebody in the audience that looked like they had something to say. And this is again something we could talk about, like looking for and paying attention to crunchy bits is what I call it, like looking for emotional resonance. I found somebody and then I just pretended like no one else was there. And we had this amazing conversation, and she cried, and afterwards people came and gave high fives.
Um,
And all I want to talk about is like, this is just a dollar symbol. Wait, I
I,
thought this was, it's just, we could have written zeros and ones. Like it's a piece of paper. Who
I'm
let all these feelings in, Michael? And what do we do about it?
I'm curious to hear a few of these stories.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Let me
know
tell
the
you.
like inadequate, desperate, and the yes, love.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about this. So I'll do them in order of the way they happen. The very first one I saw was this yes one. And I was like, wow, that's so much enthusiasm. So I'm going to unshare my screen and we'll just
Okay.
so you and I can talk. But um, I've still got the list here in front of me. So that was the very first one. As I was flipping through the cards after they
Okay.
handed them in, I was like, nah, and I said, "Who? Like, if the person who wrote this is willing, could we talk for a minute?" And she was like, "Yeah." And I was like, what I asked her was, "Are you allowed? Like, who? Are you allowed to be open about love? Like, money first feeling is love? Like." And so we had a whole dialogue. She was like, "Well, look, I was raised in a family where that's just what I was taught. Like it's a tool. It's an opportunity to make a difference, and therefore I love it." And
Wondering what
yes,
the angle
like
is. I mean, like, money equals love because you like give money and gifts to people you love, like that angle, or something else.
that's a great question. I didn't ask that question. To me, what she said was, "I love money because of the difference it can make in my life and the people around me.
Okay.
And she had been raised with that idea. Like, and so, but just think of the fruitful, like, because that led to, honestly, that was probably it was at least 10 minute, I want to say 15-minute. It was probably at least 10 minutes of like, wait, who else feels this way and is scared to say it? And there was a whole group of people that were like, like kind of raising their hands. And I was like, well, what's that about? They're like, well, we were taught not to love money. The love of money is the root of all evil. Like
Right.
that came up, like
Yes, I read that once in a
amazing.
book. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Amazing. So again, no, this is one thing we have to be very careful about financial planners. The work that we do with clients, like keep your values off other people's plans. Like there's no judgment on this person because she said she loved money. And you should have seen her. Like she lit up. And it was clear it was good, It wasn't like I love money, I'm greedy like that. Okay, that one. Now let me tell you the story about what did he say? Inadequate and
Inadequate,
desperate.
desperate.
This was I mean, yeah, it was really to me really an emotional experience that I was like I was flipping through the cards and I hit that one and was just like, "Oh." Like I wonder. And I didn't want to be unfair. So I just said, there's one in here that is like, and I put some other words together. I was like, it's kind of like there's some in here that point to scary and anxious and words like desperate. And so I tried to soften a little bit to give this person permission to not say anything. And I said, if you put down words like, in fact, there's one in here that says inadequate and desperate. Anybody who put anything like that, would you be willing to talk? And that guy raised his hand and said that actually inadequate desperate's actually me, the
Okay.
exact words. And I was like, oh, okay, big guy, big like big beard, hat, like clearly like kind of like out here in the West, you would recognize this person as somebody who's probably spends lots of time in the outdoors. I want to say hunting even, like that. Probably has a truck, like that kind of thing. Not a soft, like feely person.
Uh-huh.
And I said, tell me the story. Like, what's that about? And in front of 19 other people, he said, yeah, my dad was a fishing and hunting guide. So things were really, really slim in the off season. And he said, in fact, I even remember like whenever he would kill, whenever he would harvest, anything more than we needed, he would always bring some back to the neighbors. Like that's just the kind of place we lived in. But in the off season, occasionally we didn't have enough. And I remember at age 6 or 7, he didn't say that. He said, I remember being very young. And I asked him later, I said, how old were you? And he said, I think 6 or 7. He said, I remember going to digging through the dumpster with a plastic bag with my dad trying to find food.
Wow.
Yeah. Like, and you could feel like, and it was really interesting because there were people in that room that I know probably had the opposite experience of money, like so much money they'd never even it never even they because of where we were there, it probably hadn't even dawned on some of those people that that would ever be a thing, they'd
Yep.
never. So hearing the stories was amazing, and I just am so fascinated again. So last story, the lady in the room of 800, she was about in the center, just to the to like my right side of the middle aisle, dark hair, and I could see she was feeling something, right? I just like was it wasn't like super obvious, it wasn't like tears, but I'm always on the lookout for crunchy bits, and sometimes I can just see
Uh,
them in the air. And I was like, "Hey, do you have a do you anybody want to share?" And she raised her hand, and so she yelled out at me, and she yelled something like anxious or nervous. And then I said, "Tell me more about that." And she said, "Oh, just like power dynamics." And I was like, "Whoa, what?" And I said, and I told her, I went like this. I put my hands up as like blinders and said, "Look, it's just you and me. There's nobody else here. Like nobody else is listening. Just can you tell me the story?" And she told this story about how she never knew about 5 or 6 o'clock when the front door opened and her dad was going to come through. She never knew. She never knew who was going to come through the front door because of what had happened at work that day. Right? Was it going to be the nice, jovial guy who landed his dad, her dad was a salesman. So it'd be the nice, jovial, friendly guy who landed a sale that day. Was going to be the really mean, grumpy guy that didn't. And it was always related to sales, which in her mind was always related to how much money he made. So there was this direct correlation between who was going to come through the door and the amount of money that was made that day in her young mind. I mean, come on. You know what I mean? And so my question is always like, it turns out the dollar symbol is a provocative symbol. It provokes. And the thing it provokes are feelings, right? Stories, trauma in some cases, happiness, joy, like all those things. So one of the things I love about financial planning as a job is that if you want to be a better financial planner, be a better human.
Hmm.
Right. And all this work we do on ourselves helps us in our job with the clients, and all the work we do with clients helps us with ourselves. So it is kind of an interesting exercise to first, like, what do you make of all these feelings? And second, like, let's talk a little bit about like what came to mind for you and maybe even listeners, like what came to mind for them? Like, what do you make of all this, Mr. Spreadsheet?
I, in this spreadsheet, what strikes me about it, I think particularly relative to some of the stories that you're sharing, is I don't know how that can't influence the
Hmm.
work that we do with clients. Like, 'cause I don't know how it can. I mean, right? If it's that ingrained for whatever those money stories are like for us, right? That just gets evoked when you see a dollar symbol, right? Just when you literally see the S with the lines through it. Right? If that's what gets evoked when you just see that image on a screen, you know, what's it like when it's your client's balance sheet and there's a bunch of numbers after it?
Yeah.
Or when it's your client's balance sheet and there's a bunch of numbers
Right. Right.
after it.
And
Because
are you saying like what's the impact on you, the planner, when you see a client's balance sheet with a bunch of numbers? Tell me more about that. That's super fascinating.
well, there was a version of this that showed up so one of the research studies that we do on the platform is what I call advisor well-being study. Essentially, we use some measures of well-being, right? How we assess our happiness and satisfaction in life. Uh, and we ask that of zillion advisors who participate in the studies. And then we ask them a lot about their practices and what they do and where they work and the size of their firm, right? Because we're trying to understand like what are the things that drive greater advisor well-being or makes us less happy in our practices. And one of the fascinating things that came up from when we did this in the last cycle, because I love just hunting for interesting points in our data, there is a relationship between happiness of advisors and the wealth of their clients. And it's negative.
Come on.
The higher the wealth, the higher the average wealth of your clients, the lower advisors' own sense of well-being.
So,
Not massive. It's not like it fell off a cliff or anything, but every
right.
single increment of greater client wealth was a downtick in advisors' own sense of well-being. Like
Oh
it
my
was a
God.
very
Of course,
it was
right?
very
But
direct line. Yeah, right. I mean, right. It was comparisons, the thief of joy,
yeah.
all of those. It shows up. Now, here is the other fascinating part. It didn't show up with the client income, only wealth.
Mm,
Higher the client income, happier advisors tended to be,
mm,
which I couldn't help but reflect back to like folks I've worked with over the years, right? Working with high net worth, very high dollar clients, right? I think there's all sorts of stuff that crops up of I wish I could afford some of the things that they do, right? Comparison is the thief of joy. You get that cropping up. But you get to high income clients. Wow, I have seen a lot of clients with really high incomes spend money on really stupid stuff they couldn't afford. And some of them had really embarrassingly small balance sheets compared to how much they had in income. And at least as we interpreted the results, there seems to be a tendency, like when I'm working with really high income folks, I can look and say, I'm more responsible than they are. I mean, I'm making more progress on my goals and I'll earn a fraction of like the crazy dollars they're earning and the things they're doing. Like, look at how responsible I am with my money compared to some of these people that I'm working with. But you get folks that are really, really high dollar net worth, and it's hard not to have some comparisons kick in that I think don't feel good
Amazing.
to us in the same way it doesn't feel good to almost any human. That's why there's a lot of keeping up with the Joneses stuff out there.
That's amazing. That's amazing. That's like our version of, the psychological problems that happen when you're like a first responder.
Yeah.
And all I mean by that is like, like it turns out, I was just reading the other day that the average career span of a paramedic is something like 4 years. And then I
It's
was even reading this with
it's
client
it's very high burnout, and anyone who stays a long time, they are
tough, tough.
incredibly cynical people that come up with some really morbid senses of humor because that's the only way you can cope.
Totally. I was actually reading this the other day about high alpine mountain guides and the and avalanche professionals, when that it's only recently where there's started to be this recognition that you need to be able to talk about your own experience when there's especially when there's a fatality or any injury or any even if you didn't do anything wrong because of the just systemic risk in those environments. But it's only recently, it used to be like you'd get together in the locker room afterwards and drink and like, so I guess the reason I'm pointing to those is like it's so interesting that we probably need to spend more time as a profession thinking about that. And I had never thought about the net worth well-being problem. We've been talking about the idea that like scary markets, you're the release valve for other people's anxiety, take care of yourself.
Yeah.
But now you've got something that's just built into the system of like comparison, feeling less than, like we
Well,
need
yeah,
help.
yes, but I don't know, like getting back to your list of words,
Yep.
to me, just there is something more like fundamental to me of just how we
Mhm.
show up to our clients, like how we would have to show up to our clients. Or if you're uh, like, I don't want to overproject someone else's difficult background. But like if we're going to inadequate, the person who used inadequate, desperate as his language because of the difficult times that he had growing up, right? My experience, at least for a lot of folks that come from that environment, is like money can then become security, right? Like I'm trying to get enough to never have to go back to that, to never have to face
Yep.
that I faced in my past, or that was so challenging for me growing up. Okay, if that's the lens of money, I'm gonna bet that influences how you show up to clients.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like, do you focus very heavily on safety of money and security of money and making sure we have enough, and I don't know, and guaranteed streams of income and other things that you might pursue if you have a very significant fear of not having enough or that it could go away.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'll contrast that with folks I know on like some of the words that you had there where, what was it, the dollar sign, like that meant freedom,
Right.
that meant independence.
There was one even like Monopoly, like playful.
Yep. So, if money is like Monopoly money and you just have fun with it, is probably quite different than how you give advice if money represents freedom and independence and something that seems pretty great to pursue. You don't pursue monopoly money, but you sure pursue independence and freedom. And that probably shows up differently than when money stokes inadequacy and desperation fear.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
What did you write down?
what did I write down? The dollar sign outright to me, just my word was wealth.
Hmm.
Dollars are wealth. Um, and so the first feeling I wrote down was safety,
Hmm.
but not safety in a security sense, safety in a flexibility sense.
Hmm. Hmm.
Like, if I have enough that this is my foundation, then I can choose what I want. I guess it's kind of like an independence vein, but I don't know. For me, I guess just like independence or freedom wasn't the word that came to mind. Like safe foundation
Hmm.
was like the mental image
Hmm.
for me and how it cropped up. And then I look at that and then I reflect back on things I do and I'm like, oh yeah, that checks out.
Hmm.
That checks out.
I
Like
see.
I like to do lots of creative things. I pursued a lot in various businesses, but I have to have the firm foundation for me. So I run around crazy doing lots of businesses and I live in the same neighborhood I've lived basically all my life, a mile and a half up the street from my folks who still live in the house that I grew up in for the past
Right.
48 years.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's amazing. Tell me what, and we could, I mean, I have so many questions about that, but that would take us an hour. What are you pointing to when you say, if you're, because these words I showed you were financial planners, like that was a group of
Yeah,
financial
yeah.
planners.
And what a fascinating range for us as
Yeah,
financial planners, right? Oh, yeah. Oh, it turns out we're humans with the wide range of experiences
yeah, turns
of
out.
all humans on Earth.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the one we didn't bring up, which is pretty close to the yes one, but the very bottom one says, "Let's go," and then the feeling is excitement, and then you go all the way there from inadequate to desperate, tool, caution, intimidating.
Yep.
So what are you pointing to in terms of what you just talked about? Like if you're a planner where it's around safety, that's going to show up. How do we? What are you pointing to? What does that mean? What's the takeaway from that?
I don't know. So because like I can look at this through a bunch of different lenses. One kind of getting to your comment earlier, be careful not to put your values onto other people's financial plans, right? So maybe there's you know, beware we're not projecting our own
Hmm.
values around money instead of what clients like really, really actually want to do, right? Can you accidentally become blind or deaf to what they're saying because
Hmm.
we have to see it through our own lens, or we can't help but see it through our own lens.
Hmm.
I can tell a story from the other end though that look, at the end of the day, a lot of the most successful advisors I know, and I mean this in a positive way, like they don't really adapt that much to their client's style and preferences. They say like, this is a good thing you should pursue, and I'm going to show you how to get there. Right?
Hmm.
Like, whatever it is. Having safety and stability in your retirement is absolutely essential, and I'm going to show you how to get there
Mm,
with various things.
Almost like they have an opinion
Yes,
about how this a theory
right,
of value and opinion, which I'm a
right.
huge fan. And then they
So whether
find people who
that's
match.
you know, safety first retirement or
Right,
money
right.
equals freedom and growth and doing amazing things once you have the autonomy to fire, right? Whatever it is. And they attract clients to them
Right.
that share
Love that.
those values and don't with the ones that don't.
Love
Right?
that. Do you think
We're
there's any other way?
we're on a journey to take you to your financial and realm of financial independence. And if someone is like, yeah, money's really more the like safety security thing because I had some really difficult challenges growing up. Like, I don't think independence when I think about my money. It's like, cool. Then I'm just going to really not resonate with you as a financial advisor. I'm going to go find a different one that
Interesting.
does. So on
Yeah.
the one hand, like I can tell the story of be careful that we don't over project our
Right.
values and experiences onto the client. And another version that says, look, clients are also like fully formed adults and human beings unto themselves. Like maybe it's okay to just show up with what we believe in the way that we believe. And if clients feel aligned to that and want to go on that journey with us, I'm so happy to work with you as a client. And if you don't, we're just probably not going to get along well. And we're going to do our, right, in modern times, you're going to see my website and it's going to turn you off, or we're going to do an intro meeting and it's going to feel like we're not clicking.
Hmm.
It's like,
You,
cool, then we'll part ways and do our thing. Like, as long as I'm not overly belligerent about it, maybe that's fine. But
yeah.
it strikes me that I don't know that we're more different about this than we realize. For something that's nominally, we collect the data from the client and craft a customized individual's financial plan specific to the client, right? It's always about them and their data and their recommendations. I'm like, yeah, and there's a little bit more of us and some of these
Mm-hmm.
image of dollar sign reactions than we give it credit for. I don't
Mm.
know that that's necessarily a bad thing if people are still finding their way to the advisors that believe the things they believe and want help for the journey that they want help with. So
Mm.
I
I
don't know
love
that's
that.
necessarily a bad thing,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know, just in this idealized world where everything is only ever the client's input to craft the recommendation, I look at some of the words on there and I'm like, I don't see how that can't be influencing the way our
Yeah.
recommendations are showing up.
I love that. Yeah, just hearing you repeat it back, even as I was saying it, I was like, I'm not sure it's possible to keep my values off your plan.
Yeah.
Like, but it is an interesting to
It's who
me.
I am. Like you hire
Yeah,
me. And this is
yeah,
me, all
yeah,
of me, and how I show up.
yeah. And I'm not. Look, I know planners who work really hard at keeping their value, and I think that's another. I often think of these like just as spiritual practices. It's like another Zen teacher showing up, like, oh. Look at me, I'm projecting again. Let me ask a better question. Let me be really careful. Like I think I heard this. Like I know planners who do an like almost unbelievable job at that, and that's a real skill and amazing. And I just never really thought of it's almost like a uh, this is the way I see the world. It's an opinion of how because money is so subjective. I wrote down, you said, as you look, like that there would be this tendency maybe to look at an advisor's, sorry, I'm an advisor, I look at clients' balance sheets or high income, and you use the words, and they had an embarrassingly small net worth relative to their income. Like even that, like what do you mean embarrassing?
Uh-huh.
Like it's so subjective. There's no real
Yes.
rule of thumb. So in a subjective world, maybe there is something to the idea of like, wait, this is my theory this is my opinion of how money should operate as an operating system in your life.
Hmm.
And then it's almost like that becomes a values based. No, we're not going to use it. We're just not going to say that. We're not going to say niche. But it's almost like
Oh,
you right. You attract. It's another version of that, right?
yes.
Where and we've tried to put words on these before, like accumulators, or I don't know what the word would be for like somebody who really values adventure and excitement.
Yeah.
So I love that. I think that's really, really good. And I want to make clear, and maybe we'll talk about this in the next episode. I'm not suggesting this is an exercise in a first meeting. I'm not suggesting this as
This is the thing for us. You're not necessarily saying like, let's do this with clients and
I'm
draw a
I'm not
dollar sign
suggesting
on a
it.
piece of paper and say, tell me, Mr. and Mrs. Client or Mrs. Prospect, like, what does this mean to you?
Yeah, I think in fact maybe we will talk about this in the next recording, just of like what does that mean? I just want to make sure we like disclaimer that feel free to do it. Feel free to use this in presentations. Feel free to take this through group settings or workshops if it resonates with you and you feel. But know that it's tricky territory and it might involve some practice. Like I've been practicing for a very long time around these subjects. So I'm not. making it as a suggestion. I just wanted to use it as the jumping off point for like who let all the feelings in, you know what I mean?
All right. Fair enough.
Cheers, Michael. That was super fun.
Thank you, Carl.